engine out, on the ground. I got to work labeling all the wiring connections and hoses. This took a lot of time because I had to look up each hose and where it went, where it came from. At first I thought I knew enough to guess the names of a few parts using what I thought sounded logical, but I was way off. I wanted to get the exact names for everything correct to make it easier to reference later when I need to find new parts or inevitably know how to put things back together. As satisfying as I imagine it might be to see everything come apart piece by piece, I'm afraid I have some bad news. I don't know what happened, but I'm missing several clips of the removal of all the wiring hoses, fuel injection system, distributor, and other various parts. I only managed to save a few photos that I took to help me remember how the wires and hoses overlapped. I was imagining this would be helpful later for assembly, so I guess we'll just have to see. Instead, I'll give you a quick tour of the rat feces landscape atop of the engine block. Alright, that's enough of that. Resuming here, removing one of the intake manifolds. I had a couple of head studs come out while doing this. Not a big deal. I think I can thread them back in with some Permatex upon reassembly. Also, seeing this, I'm glad I never tried to fire it up. This rusty dust would have been sucked right in, I'm pretty sure. Now, removing the sheet metal was an important lesson in patience. I don't know the history or logic behind the use of these cheese head screws in VW engines, other than that they were probably cheap. But I am over it. I can save you the agony I went through and just tell you it involved lots of this, and this. Finally, everything came apart. I have a lot of sheet metal I'll need to patch in and a few new nuts to weld in place when it comes time to put all of this back together. The remaining few items on top of the block now are the bracket that holds the distributor on, the oil filler, and plenum. And tucked up underneath the plenum is something I'm not quite sure of. It's either the temperature switch, temperature sensor, or the cold start valve. If you know what that is, let me know in the comments. After that, I moved on to the exhaust. I ended up breaking several bolts, which wasn't surprising. What was surprising was that a lot of these bolts were not metric. Found a lot more rat turds as well. Before removing the shroud, I had to remove the pulley and alternator. just one bolt that holds the tension on the belt, one that holds these guards or brackets in place, and one carriage bolt that the alternator actually pivots on. And this little rubber 90-degree angle boot in the back. With that out of the way, then I could work on removing the fan. And then just these 4 main bolts. Then I disconnected the thermostat flaps. I wasn't sure if they had to come off in order to get the shroud removed. But one nut attached to the oil cooler, and that's all it was, and it came free. Then I could finally remove the remaining tins from the top. Then the oil pressure sensor and head temperature sensor. And since I thought this might be in the way of removing the lower cylinder tins, I removed the thermostat pulley. And here I'm removing the engine bar mounts. Then to separate the transmission, I first lifted it slightly with the jack so I could pull it straight back without having to balance it on anything. And it's just 3 bolts because one of them also holds the starter on, which I had already removed. And lastly, I removed the clutch and pressure plate. And I'm seeing lots of clutch dust around the edges here. I'm not sure if the clutch is still good or not or whatever. It might just be something I replace regardless. And that's going to do it for this video. Next up, I'll disassemble both the long and the short block. Thanks for watching.